In this presentation, we will learn about standpoint theory. Standpoint theory, in simple words, means a framework from which we analyze a particular event, phenomenon, or act. It is a viewpoint which we have an understanding based on our social location. The social location could be gender, class, ethnicity, sexuality, etc. For example, a migrant during COVID-19 had to walk towards his village, manage his expenses, take risks, and handle the uncertainty. So his standpoint about COVID would be entirely different from someone who had enough savings, owned a house, etc. Here, the migrant would give a better picture of the real world, the experience of the crisis. They have a critical reflection. Standpoint theory points out that those oppressed and marginalized could give an informed view of the world. They would be able to see the status quo and write about it, as they are living through the status quo. Studying standpoint theory is important as it gives the marginalized groups a platform for them, allowing them to challenge the status quo. The status quo, which is often filled with views of dominant white males who are having a position on the basis of their privilege. Origins of standpoint theory. The roots of standpoint theory could be found in the works of George William Frederick Hegel, who explored the various viewpoints of slaves and masters in 1807. He used it to explain the master slave connection. He believed is about people's belonging positions and how the organizations influence people to earn authority. Karl Mannerheim, one of the founders of Sociology of Knowledge, also proposed work on the relationship between social standpoints and knowledge, that is, worldview, which is sometimes disregarded. The topic has long been debated in the field of sociology of knowledge and the Frankfurt School's debate with critical theory. However, standpoint theory has also become more popular with feminists. Feminist standpoint theory. Feminist standpoint theory is a feminist theoretical paradigm that claims knowledge is derived from one's social position. This viewpoint disputes the objectivity of traditional science and claims that research and theory have overlooked and suppressed women and feminist perspectives. This notion arose from Marx's argument that people from oppressed groups have special access to knowledge that those from privileged groups do not. In the 1970s, feminist writers were encouraged by Marx's insight to investigate how gender disparities affect knowledge creation. Their research looks into the nature and sources of knowledge, emphasizing that knowledge is universal. Sandra Harding, an American feminist theorist, invented the term standpoint theory to define epistemologies that place a high value on women's understanding. She claimed that those at the top of social hierarchies are prone to losing sight of actual human relationships and the true nature of social reality, causing them to overlook vital concerns about the social and natural world in their academic pursuits. People at the bottom of social hierarchies, on the other hand, have a distinct perspective that is a better beginning place for studies. Even though such persons are frequently overlooked, their marginalized status allows them to outline key research issues more easily and explain social and natural concerns. Dorothy Smith is a sociologist from Canada. Smith argues in her 1989 book, The Everyday World as Problematic, a Feminist Sociology, that sociology has disregarded and objectified women, making them the other. Smith said, for example, that because women have traditionally been the carers in society, males have been able to devote their efforts to think about abstract concepts that are deemed more significant. As a result, women's activities are rendered invisible and viewed as natural rather than part of human culture and history. From a female standpoint, sociologists can raise specific questions about why women are assigned to certain activities and the consequences for social institutions such as education, the family, government, and the economy. Objective empiricism. The concept that science can be objective through rigorous methodology is also questioned by standpoint theorists. Harding, for example, claimed that, despite their claims of neutrality, scientists had ignored their own androcentric and sexist research methods and results, and that understanding the viewpoint of knowledge producers makes people more aware of the power inherent in positions of scientific authority. According to standpoint theorists, starting from the perspective of women or other oppressed people increases the likelihood of acknowledging the relevance of standpoint and producing embodied, self critical, and coherent knowledge. In her book, Black Feminist Thought, Knowledge, Consciousness, and the Politics of Empowerment, American sociologist Patricia Hill Collins advocated a kind of viewpoint theory that highlighted the perspective of African American women. Collins maintained that the matrix of oppression, an interwoven system of racial, gender, and class oppression and privilege, has provided African American women with a unique perspective on their excluded situation. She demonstrated how economic exploitation of African American women's labor, political denial of their rights, and controlling cultural images that created harmful stereotypes oppressed them. She suggested that African American women can contribute something unique to feminist scholarship. As a result, Collins has advocated for a more inclusive scholarship that opposes information that dehumanizes and objectifies persons. Indigenous Standpoint Theory, or IST. Indigenous knowledge fuels multi-billion dollar genetics supply industries ranging from food and pharmaceuticals in developed countries to chemical products, energy, and other manufacturers. Indigenous standpoint theory has struggled to gain widespread acceptance in academic areas, particularly in the humanities. An indigenous methodological approach to research is a procedure in which research is conducted for the benefit of the researcher rather than for the non indigenous researcher's academic institution. The community being studied retains and values the knowledge gained. This is viewed as an indigenous protocol that might encourage indigenous higher degree research students to participate in the documentation of indigenous knowledge within an indigenous acceptability framework that is also academically rigorous. This enables indigenous researchers to speak from their cultural standpoint, assist in cultural maintenance, and present their own epistemological truth to produce a more inclusive and therefore more complex form of knowledge. Martin Nakata is associated with the indigenous standpoint theory. Indigenous standpoint theory is widely used in New Zealand, Africa, Tanzania, Australia to study indigenous people. Few important key principles on which standpoint theory is based are: it aims at the promotion of human rights and social justice. It focuses on raising the voices of indigenous people. It tries to address the issues that are valuable and important for the community. It focuses on empathizing and acknowledging the political, social, and historical context of a given society. It works on building a healthy cultural interface or bond. It tries to understand the role and position of the researcher in the research and that of the participants. In the article Indigenism and Australian Social Work, the author gives the cyclical diagram whereby the points they discuss are that of understanding the Aboriginal way of being, ontology, then Aboriginal ways of knowing, epistemology, decolonizing methodology, practicing culturally safe methods, etc. Examples of indigenous research are studying the Jarawa community of Andaman by a PhD student from JNU. He stayed with them for several years, recorded their language, understood them from pictures of body parts, birds, animals, and sign languages. He wrote about the grammar of the Jarawa language. The scholar writes how once the parents of the crying child had gone hunting and he saw the crying child and picked up, and that gave him acceptance into the community. This shows that indigenous research is not just about techniques and bookish knowledge, but being humble in the fieldwork. This PhD is the first one in the Jarawa language in India. Another example is that Dr. Wasim Iqbal, whose parents had died. However, he used the funds he got from the tsunami to complete his education. He earned a doctorate on seawater intrusion along east and west coasts of South Andaman Islands. The communitarian aspect can be seen when he was awarded on the radio. It was announced in Andaman about him. People even asked if he would not be coming back to the village to treat the people, as people didn't understand the difference between doctorate and doctor. This is a classic example of indigenous research. He is the first person from Andaman who resides there and studied about his community. This is also an example of indigenous standpoint theory or literature. I hope you now have a better understanding of standpoint theory. Thank you for watching the presentation. Do like, subscribe, share, and leave your comments about this presentation or any other topics you would like to learn more about.